Part of your other secret sauce that coincidentally blew up because of the pandemic, you would give a seminar. There would be, call it 30 people in the room. And then you knew from those 30, so many would end up becoming clients. But then the pandemic hit and you couldn't travel.
Yeah, so before the pandemic, every event was 60 to 80 people, 35% were brand new names. Of those, 65% came in, and of those, 87% became customers. So it was a formula.
Because, yeah, you were offering something for free. What's the downside? I mean, you could give them advice and they could just say, you know what, I don't like this and I'm not going to follow it.
And typically, my largest competitor was somebody who just doesn't see the value and is not willing to pay the fee, right? So it wasn't other advisory firms. And I would actually say that's the case in pretty much every vertical that we're targeting.
Did anyone at these big companies look at what you were doing and say, you're nuts? Like you're giving away something for free. You're not charging.
Unquestionably, and even worse, because everything we've done to date has been what I would describe as grassroots, like bottom up, hand-to-hand combat, if you will. We didn't have any corporate endorsement. Related, we've had now.
They were creating friction for you.
Well, and so it's interesting because as we've gotten bigger, we've actually had businesses now ask us to come in, and they're asking what we would charge for consulting. I'm like, I'll do it for free.
Oh, nice.
I'll do it for free, right? Like,
right.
To me, the opportunity is the relationships, and I don't want to prevent access.
By the way, there's a conflict. If an employee knows that you're being paid, they're like, oh, he's being paid, so he's probably guiding us into this or that. But it's like, no, I'm not. I don't got a dog in this hunt. I'm going to tell you what I think is the best.
Bingo.
Period. End of story.
But back to your original question, the pandemic changed everything. So when I think about growing a business and having this pipeline, like obviously I knew the data on what my flows were, and I was using that to predict like future staffing needs. But I also knew I had a pipeline that was equivalent to the size of my business at the time. And that's the future. Like that's what I'm working for, in addition to maintaining what we have. And I was so afraid of losing that pipeline that ultimately I was looking for every possible way of still connecting with our target demographics without losing any of the momentum and inertia that we had already created. So as the pandemic happened, and even in Texas, not to get into a COVID thing, but even in Texas, they did not want to be in big rooms together. Fine.
Right.
So, we couldn't do the dinner seminars or the lunch events that we were doing before. So it forced us to go digital. And I had been thinking about digital prior to, capacity, whatever.
Yeah.
But this was an example where we didn't have a choice.
Part of the pandemic, the general population in corporate America was not on Zoom, digital, whatever. It just wasn't a way of doing business.
I mean, hell, I was getting in a plane and flying to Texas every week. Like, no. And so March 23rd of 2020 was the first Zoom I had ever done. And it was a seminar that I had creatively titled, Can I Still Afford to Retire? Now, mind you, the markets were down, let's just say 33%, 34%. I didn't know where we were in that cycle. It ended up being the day before the low in 2020, right? But I ended up having 397 attendees on my Zoom. First Zoom I've ever done.
You must have been like, what the hell is going on?
I remember, because obviously we had to, so I was live, by the way. We recorded it and edited it afterwards, but I remember vividly looking at the number and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is absolutely the most people, I didn't say that out loud, but this is the most people I've ever presented to at once. Candidly, now I've done 10,000 people that I've spoken to. But the point is at the time I'm like, I'm staring at a mirror because that's basically all Zoom is. And I'm going to do this presentation. We had 397 people watch the live version, 700 people watch the digital version right after it. And the light bulb went off. I'm like, I got to get digital as fast as I possibly can. And a lot of people during the pandemic, they played golf, they spent time with family, they did fun things. I didn't, and my family didn't see me at all because I was staying separate and continuing to go to the office. But I spent the next 2 weekends coming in. I brought 6 suits in, did these little wardrobe changes, and I spent all 4 of those weekend days just filming content. And we spent like 25 grand redoing our website and built like the initial media archive. And then we just started doing email campaigns, sending out the recordings of our presentations. And
Again, and you were giving away free
oh, we
content.
gave it all away. Yeah. And if you look at the Bogart Wealth website, you'll see even some of that legacy stuff, and even it's on our YouTube channel. Like, we gave it all away, and I don't gateway it. There are ways that you can subscribe to this to our content, so you get the updates as the updates are released. But we're giving it all away. We were getting, let's just say, 15 to 20 new leads every single month doing the live events. After we started getting that digital stuff inside, I remember the week of July 4th of 2020, we had 100 unique new leads that week, and it continued to grow week over week over week. And you want to talk about scaling? Like, I had to take one of my internal people, move them into a business development role just so they could respond to the inbound communications, finding times to book meetings with these people. Like, it was a rapidly scaling exercise as fast as we could.
Wow. And you've just provided me a great idea. One of the reasons I started this podcast was not to market for R360 at all. It was to give away what's in the head of incredibly successful individuals like yourself that have literally got yourself off the floor after being knocked out, negative net wealth, and built incredible wealth. So my grandfather always said, if you're going to learn to shave, try to learn on someone else's face first. But the idea that you gave me is I've been working with families of wealth now, myself being one of them too, since 2011 when I started with Tiger 21. But Tiger was more about being a better investor, where we're about holistic wealth. And I could take like some really deep learnings around the fishes: financial, intellectual, social, human, emotional, and spiritual. So I'm writing this in the night out and bringing value that I give to members. But, half of the members probably read it, but I could, like you, create like incredible content and just give it away for free.
You know this, but AI can leverage that even faster.
John Marshall had $2 billion exits, software engineer. Now he's in the wild, wild west of AI. He has 200 employees. He's going to provide the AI backbone for R360. And he was telling me, oh, I used to pay like $100,000 for these commercials that now my team can do in 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
In 3 minutes, I can get a quality commercial that I would put on television or on the web that would cost me $100,000 10 years ago. Nuts, right?
Oh, and he's probably paying pennies for it.
He told me what the cost was, and it was basically nothing, but to get them really done well.
I had in my head before to do that digital stuff that I had to have this elaborate production, and I had to hire a videographer and all that other stuff. That was so wrong. Like, people didn't care about the production quality. They cared about the content. And what I would encourage, just even hearing this dialogue, is get momentum, get started, and then you can pretty it up afterwards, right?
We were in the Wall Street Journal this weekend. I was talking about R360, how instead of doing a portfolio defense for Tiger 21 that you do once a year, we put together a 45-minute film documentary that would cost you $100,000. And we have an award-winning filmmaker, a woman that used to run a TV station out of London for 14 years. So we already have that team doing it. And every week we're filming, because the idea is, how do you speak to your great-great-grandchildren who you're never going to meet? How do you transfer those values that we were talking about and ensure that you're inspiring them to live a happy, productive life? So we have the filmmaking team already. It's not like we got to go hire. I'm already paying for them.
I think the question becomes, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Like, if distributing your fantastic content to more people just to educate them, then problem solved, right? But if the goal is to engage them in a manner that you're trying to get more members or build the community,
both.
Then it's a different level of content and a different level of engagement.
Right. So you and I are going to talk, because I want to pick your brain, because I'm sure you have a ton of lessons and would be able to guide me on what to do and what not to do.
What I've learned, and this is I think very relevant for the audience, is business development has to be, I have in my mind a flywheel, right? You can't just rely on one medium to connect and engage with people. You have to use webinars, you have to use podcasts, you have to use social media, you need to use metadata now. Like, there's so many different outlets that people need to be engaged with. And especially with a buying decision, like my industry, it's not uncommon that we're hitting multiple generations on the decision to hire us, right? So what speaks to one might not speak to another. And I think, like, for example, with R360, you have the gauntlet of generation,
Yeah,
right?
30-year-old to 80-year-old.
Yeah.
We even had a 92-year-old that applied, and his one question was, if I die before the 3-year membership, can I pass it to an heir?
Did you tell them they had to reapply?
No, I said no problem. But that heir has to go through
That's what I'm saying.
the membership process. Yeah. So he didn't apply. And maybe he didn't have confidence in his heir.
Or
I
his
don't know.
ability to live 3 years, one or the other. Both are problems.
You're right in that it is very nuanced. It is a flywheel. Now, you mentioned flywheel, so I'm going to mention it to my audience. Jim Collins has a flywheel concept. Amazon is Amazon because in 2001, they adopted the Jim Collins flywheel, and it's sequential. You have to do X first at a 9 or 10 level, which then leads you to this. And if you do that at 9 or 10, it leads you to that. And then it spins around. But if you put all your resources in step 3, because you haven't really thought about it and you haven't done 1 or 2, that wheel isn't going to spin, or it's not going to spin very well. It's not going to be sustainable.
I'll speak to myself. I am a visionary, like following the EOS infrastructure. Like, I'm the visionary. I'm not the integrator. I'm not the implementer. Most businesses don't let the visionary get out of the way. And one of the things that I think I did very well and right was I delegated and empowered. And frankly, I could have done even better. But having someone to run business development for me that can take my brain and turn it into a process and go and implement it was invaluable. And now it's at a different level where I had my tracking matrix and things I was looking at, but now, I mean, my dashboards have dashboards, right? And like, I can click in and I could see visibility on every part of our lead flow engines, all the business development.
When you think of an integrator, it's more COO, but what you just said is more sales, right?
It's an integrator on the sales side, right? Like,
Right.
so I have my president's my integrator. Well, I'm an EOS as well. My president's my integrator, but then we have each of our respective department heads. My point is, most founders are great salespeople, but when it comes to running a process on a sales side, not very good. Again, I'm going to speak to myself.
I'm in the same boat, and I had brought on Michael Cole, who is an incredible operator. He's built like 3 businesses that started from 0 and became 15 billion, and he did it within those big corporate organizations. So he has a skill set that, quite frankly, I don't have, which he became the integrator until he decided he wanted to go do something else within R360, be a chair. And that's what he's doing now. So I have a different integrator, but some people are born with that ability.
But it's similar to the archetypes, right? Like, there are so many different ways of creating wealth. It's not just one avenue, right? And that's, to me, is the most fascinating part of the stories and the journeys. I totally geek out as I meet new people. Like, all right, how'd you do it? What'd you do? Right? Like, especially when you go into areas where I would just say there's a prevalence of wealth, right? You go to like South Florida and it's like, where is all this money coming from, right? Like, and then you start to engage with these individuals and it's like, these are some amazing stories.
We don't have many financial advisors in R360, but first, you had mentioned the difficulty in hiring the people with the right culture. What is a hiring mistake that you've learned to avoid? And what is the single best interview question that you ask people to come into your organization?
The single biggest mistake is I would hire somebody because I liked them. And I thought that I would get along with them. And which I learned very quickly, especially in leadership roles, the best hires are actually usually the people that I don't get along with, like the personalities.
Because they challenge you, right?
Yeah. And so I would say, coming back to that core values comment, like hiring alignment with those, making sure that you're hiring specific to your core values, that's extremely important. It's extremely important to hire for that alignment, being intentional. You want somebody who can be with you today, but also be with you in the future. not necessarily somebody that you just want to go and play golf or have a beer with, right? Like those are not the type of people that you need to be hiring.
If you're young and watching this and you want to create wealth, there is a strategy, and I want you to help younger people, call it the 18 to 30 bucket. Let's start there. I'd love for you to give them advice on both phases. Like phase one, what should they be doing if they want to create wealth so that they're going to have freedom? And then when they've created a certain amount, and maybe you can guide like what that range would be, what would be your checklist of this is the type of financial advisor, these are the questions I'd ask, is what they would look like. And obviously there are certain financial advisors that they have minimums like 10 million, but let's just say that it's not one of them.
So on the wealth creation question, I would say start with creation of value. Find a problem that is consistent that needs a solution.
But let's say they're not an entrepreneur. Let's say they're working for those 10 years, 11, like you, like me. They're in the military, they're working for an organization, they're working hard, they're getting promoted. So over that 10-year period.
But even in that accumulation phase, then it just becomes math. Spend less than what you make, right? And make sure you're saving first.
For you, it's so freaking obvious because you spent your whole life studying this and advising people. Explain it to somebody that doesn't really get it. What should be their goal?
I think goals have to be individual to each of us respectively, right? There are lots of people who their goal is to have a fantastic lifestyle. And because of that, that means they spend more. But that decision has consequences. That decision means that you're going to have to work longer. If your goal is, I want to be independently wealthy by the age of 50, and I'm going to work hard for the next 25 to 30 years to be able to accomplish that so that I have financial independence and I'm free. At 50 years old, I can do whatever I want. Well, that's another decision that also has consequences, which means you need to save more earlier on. So my point with all of that is each of us respectively has different and individualized goals, and making sure that you're aligned on what that is with the strategy that you're implementing and executing.
Let's say it's one of your kids and they're like, Dad, you know what? I respect everything you've done, but you know what? I want to create my own wealth. I have this financial goal by age 50. I want to be worth $5 million. Can you help me figure out how I need to do that?
That's math. Yeah. My basic answer is you need to build a financial plan and you need to do it as early as humanly possible. But let's use this example. Somebody who's making $100,000 a year, you know, right off the bat, $25,000 to $30,000 is going away just for taxes, depending upon where you live. You got FICA, you got Medicare, you got income tax. So you've got 70 left. And then at that point, you need to live. But in order to hit that goal, that's where building a financial plan is imperative. And it might be as quickly as possible, you're maxing out your 401k contributions, 23,500 right now, right? Max that out. That's the first step.
Tell them why. Tell them about like the matching component.
Time value of money. So a dollar today is worth significantly more in the future because of compounding. So most companies have a match as well. So my general guidance for anyone going into the workforce is at an absolute bare minimum, you're putting enough money in to max out your match. So like, for example, Bogart Boss match is 6%. So if you put up to 6% of your income. So if you put $6,000, you make 100 grand, you put $6,000 in, I put $6,000 in, right? Like it's a 6%.
That's year one, that's 12. Explain what compounding is, which Einstein or Buffett or someone said is the eighth wonder of the world.
Yep. Well, and again, this is where it's math, right? I'm super quick to answer that. But let's just say you put a dollar in today, it grows 10%. Now it's worth $1.10. Next year, it grows by another 10%. Now it's worth $1.21. And it continues to grow and compound year over year over year. So the earlier you can get money into these accounts and starting growing and working for you, the better off that you're going to end up being financially. I think about my kids, right? Like I am actually putting money in. So my kids are employees of my business, and each of them get paid a salary for that. They're each getting money that is now making it so that they can have a Roth IRA, and we're creating Roths for them. You know, and I've had colleagues say to me, "Why do you care?" Well, I care because I know the value of compounding and the time value of money. When I look at what my 8-year-old's already accumulated in a Roth IRA account, which is growing tax-free for the rest of her life already, and she's 8, right? Like that is meaningful wealth creation.
Absolutely. The decisions you have to make, if you have this goal of doing a minimum, let's say of 6,000 to get that match, you're going to have to do certain lifestyle choices if you want to hit that goal.
You're exactly right. And this is where it's individual to each and every one of us. But if you have the goal of financial independence and of creating meaningful wealth, you need to spend significantly less than what you're actually making and save the rest of it. It's interesting. I have individuals that never went past being a mid-level manager at I'll use Exxon that have accumulated more wealth than presidents of ExxonMobil have because of being fiscally conservative, well below their means, and it meant very difficult sacrifices. Instead of doing a European vacation, they drove somewhere, right? As an example, instead of driving a Mercedes Benz or a BMW, they drove a Camry or a Kia. I'm not bashing either of those cars. I think they're great cars. It's just different price points, of course. They made those sacrifices early on so that they could have the independence later on. They didn't need to live in the bougiest, nicest apartment, in the towns that they were in. They were okay with a 15-minute commute or 30-minute commute because they were able to save $2,000-3,000 a month in living accommodations, as an example.
Right. And I want you to get into compounding because I just don't think young people understand this well enough. I was
I don't
born,
think old people understand it either.
yeah, I was born on February 28th. 28 for some reason is my favorite number. What I like about it is that if you take one penny and you compound it 28 times, you become a millionaire, a million three. 28 is when that penny jumps to over a million. People don't understand the math. Explain what the rule of 72 is and why that's so important.
Rule of 72 is the rate of return that you need for your money to double once, right? So, for example, you take the rate of return divided by 72, and that tells you the number of years it's going to take for it to double. So, 72 divided by 10%, if you get a 10% annualized rate of return, your money's going to double in 7.2 years. To Charlie's point, that's a pretty conservative rate of return based on what we've been seeing.
If you were managing their money, obviously, you're going to manage somebody's money differently if they're 25 than if they're 55. You're going to choose different assets that have different risks. So you spread it out. On average, you're projecting, hey, with this type of portfolio, which I'm creating for you because you're only 22 years old, and you have a long time horizon, things may go up and down over the next 3 or 4 years, but over a long period of time, they're going to do really well for you versus somebody that's already 60 and is going to retire in 5 years. You're going to say, well, we got to be a little bit more or a lot more conservative with your portfolio.
You stole the words out of my mouth. I kind of categorically describe it in 2 phases. We have the accumulation phase and then the deaccumulation phase. While someone's working and they have an income and they have the ability to continue to compound and save, like that's one strategy. When we are nearing the deaccumulation phase, like, yeah, sure, it's appropriate to start to throttle back on the amount of risk that the portfolio is taking. But when they're in the deaccumulation phase, it's all about income and cash flow. But the other harsh reality is that someone might have accumulated, let's just say it's $5 million and they need $200,000 a year to live on. They don't need all $5 million right now to cover their living expenses. So there still is risk in the portfolio.
If you're making 5% a year, you could be drawing 250,000 a year,
That's
and it stays at that $5 million level. But if you only need 100 or 100, then it's continuing to grow. The other thing that I find that people don't think about enough is taxes and tax strategy and what somebody with your experience can do. If you, within the law, do these things that you're legally allowed to do, your accumulation and distribution is going to be much, much better because you did a little planning with somebody that knows the tax law.
So to be clear, I would very genuinely say if the only value an individual sees in a financial advisor is their ability to manage their money, then that's a terrible financial advisor. I mean, absolutely terrible, and you should not hire them. If all you're looking for is money management, buy index funds, go low cost, be passive, and just keep adding and let it go, right? They typically go in parallel, but an index fund is where you're literally just buying the respective index that you're targeting. It could be the S&P 500, it could be the NASDAQ, it could be the Dow Jones, it could be international. You just buy the index, which is a pool bundle of, for example, the S&P 500. It's 500 stocks in one index fund. Just buy
And the
that.
fee is very, very, you buy a Vanguard, you're virtually paying a minimal fee for that. And you can do it all on your own. You could call your bank and
Yeah.
say,
You set up an account with a Charles Schwab or a Fidelity or any of those other custodians, and the cost is very, very inexpensive. And passive means you set it up and you leave it alone.
that is so, so important. You need to have the minimum level of education to say, if I do what James just said, I'm going to take all my money and I'm going to put it in a Vanguard fund. You can go to Fidelity and say, okay, let's say I did this in 2005 when I started working and I was putting in X amount every year, and you know what the market did. What would I have today? You can kind of see that, and you could see, okay, your average return that you could have done on your very own with minimal friction at all, you could have created a return of, let's say, 8%. And I always like to look for after-tax return, but if it's in a, let's say, IRA that you've set up or a 401k, it's not being taxed, it's growing tax-free. So let's say you created 8%. So now 10 years have gone by and you have a few $100,000 now saved up, where now I want to get James's advice. But what he said that is so important is you got to go into that meeting thinking, hey, last 11 years, I've gotten 8%. I've paid virtually no fees with the Vanguard ETF of the S&P 500. So if this individual that I'm talking to, he has to do a delta over that. Otherwise, I might as well continue to do it myself, because if I give this person all this money and they lose money, they do less than 8%, then what the hell am I paying for? So what advice would you have, almost like a checklist, now that you've laid that out, which I think is brilliant, because people don't think like they could do that on their own?
Well, and again, I come back to that comment I just made a moment ago. If you only see the value in the money management, don't hire it, right? And to me, the value of an advisor is the integration of services, right? And it's being able to start with a plan, having a financial plan. There's value there, right?
Because a financial plan isn't only what you have in the market. Yeah, it's very comprehensive. You have children. What's the cost of? Are they going to go to college? Your
Estate
expenses.
planning, insurance needs, emergency fund. Oh yeah, and what do you need to be doing from an accountability perspective to accomplish your goal, whatever your respective goal is. So having a plan, and then coming back to your question on taxes, like the integration of taxes is, to me, is paramount. Like it's not just how you're saving, it's where you're saving.
No, I always like the examples of like the mistakes that somebody has made. What are like just some examples?
Let's use the common, the typical
Okay.
person, right? Like they go work at a company. The first mistake is they don't set up their 401k, right? I've seen that so many times. They're giving up whatever the respective match is. They're not getting that. Like that to me is super, super basic. I've seen many times where they might set up their 401k and they might even set up their auto distribution, their auto contribution into it, but then they don't give it investment instructions, so it just sits in cash. Like that, I mean, again, those are very, very minute things. Like most 401ks now have Roth options in them. And I would tell you, like, it's again, this comes back to math. But if you have belief and conviction that you're going to have your income's going to rise.
You said Roth option. What is a Roth option? What does that mean?
There's three types of accounts. After tax, which a lot of people call non-qualified accounts. This is after tax dollars that you put in. So you had to earn it, then you had to live, then you save. But with those types of accounts, you pay taxes on interest and dividends. You pay taxes on capital gains when you sell something at a gain. So it's sometimes very tax inefficient in that regards. But there are no age restrictions on when you can access those funds. You can get them at any point in your life. And that's where I would say on outside of any of your retirement plans, where you should be accumulating most of your wealth.
Are these still within the whole
No, sorry.
401k
So,
bundle?
so a non-qualified account would be a brokerage account. Your checking account's a non-qualified
Right.
account.
Your banking
Yeah, they're
account.
outside of your retirement benefits. Then the next bucket is the qualified world, which a lot of people call them pre-tax. This is 401ks, 457s, 453s. And then IRAs will also fit into this category where you can roll a 401k from your employer or previous employer into an IRA. But this is pre-tax money. So if you're, let's just say, making 100 grand and you put 20,000 into your 401k, your taxable income goes from 100 to 80. So you're only taxed on the 80,000. That 20,000 is now growing completely tax deferred, meaning you pay no tax along the way, but when you start pulling the money out, you pay ordinary income taxes, just like you earned it. You can't touch those types of accounts until the age of 59 and a half. So there's an age restriction, and they're really designed for retirement savings. And by the way, when you hit the age of 73 or 75, depending upon what your birth year is, you have what are called required minimum distributions. You're required to take a percentage of those
Right.
accounts out. And then the third category is Roths. Now, Roths are after tax money that go into a retirement account. And those accounts grow completely tax free as long as they've been in the account for 5 years and you're over the age of 59 and a half.
There's not a lot you can put in there too. There's a max, right?
Well, so there's two ways of putting them in: contribute or convert. So a contribution can be done either directly to a Roth IRA. It's capped at $7,000 a year if you're under the age of 50, another thousand, so 8,000 if you're over the age of 50. But there's also Roth 401ks. So you can put within a 401k plan up to the max 401k allowable amount, 23,500 in, and those will grow completely tax free for the rest of your life.
But you're putting in after tax. You've already been taxed on the money. It's sitting on your bank account, and you can say, "Hey, I just heard James tell me I'm going to go to my company and say, do you have a Roth 401k, which is different than a regular 401k?" And if they say yes, you could take the money from your bank account, $23,000. That's you've already paid taxes. Put it in there,
Yep.
and that grows. And does that include if you're married? Is it still the 23?
23.5. Yeah, but if you're both actively participating and have an employer, you can each do it.
Right. But if you right, so it depends if you're a spouse. So but what if your company says, no, we don't have a Roth 401k. We just have a 401k.
Then you don't have the choice. But I would tell you almost every plan at this point has the Roth 401k option within the 401k.
Can you do both?
Absolutely. As you're capped at the 23,500. So
no matter what.
Yes.
So you can either put the money in yourself, or it could be the match thing, or if I put in X and the company, like if it's 4%, 5% of if you're making $100,000, they could put in 5,000 from your salary, and then they're going to match it with another 5.
Correct. Now the 23.5 is the amount that you can put in. The total that can go in is actually, don't quote me on that, I think it's 70,000 total, which that number is your contribution that you're getting the tax benefit for, plus what your employer match would be, and then you can actually put after-tax dollars into a 401k plan.
The advantage of putting in the 23, you've already paid taxes on it, but the advantage of doing that, let's say you're going to put in the 23 from your bank account that you have saved now.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to get a match from your company so that you hit that total of 70, right? That's your
Yeah, I mean the math would be, let's use a little bit of a bigger income number. Let's say it's 200,000.
Sure, yeah.
Right? And let's just say that they're going to give 5% of 200. So that's $10,000 that they're going to put in. You put the 23.5 in, right? So now you're at 33.5. The delta is you writing a check for after-tax dollars to put into there.
Right, but that 33,000 doesn't take you close to that
70.
That
Yeah,
70 max. But if you were making 500,000 a year and you were putting away whatever the number is, you could get to, let's say you only got to 50, and then you could put out of pocket another 23.5. Now you hit that max.
Mhm.
And explain why you want to do that and why you tell people to move money from their bank account and to do as much as they can and still live, so you hit that
Yeah,
70.
I come back to my terrible joke, but the financial planner in me will have you literally save every dollar you ever make, leave nothing left to live. No, but
Right, of
the,
course.
the point is that when you can get those dollars in there, it provides a tremendous amount of optionality. What I mean by that is this is an example where some plans allow for what we call a mega backdoor Roth strategy. So that extra dollars that you put in from your checking account into the 401k, we can then convert that out and move that into a Roth IRA. So it's also now growing completely tax free. Some we just leave in there to use to offset against cost basis of highly appreciated employer stock, like those NUA shares. So we can get those shares out tax free. The most you can get into the Roth 401k is the 23.5. The employer match would go into a traditional 401k, and then the after tax dollars would also go into a traditional 401k. They're just denoted as after tax dollars.
All right. So now we talked about the rule of 72. So let's say you have this 70 and it's in these accounts and you're able to grow at 10% a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 7 years, it doubles, but it's accumulating also. Now you're in your 70s and you want to uh, take it out. What is the tax advantage?
Anything that went in there pre-tax, you pay ordinary income to take it out. But any of the after-tax dollars, like the Roth money that you put in, it's all completely tax-free. What you put in plus all the gains.
If you took like 20,000 from your bank account and you just put it in there, you paid taxes on it first before, but now with that, are you paying taxes also?
On the gain, yeah. If the gain's going to be treated because it's completely tax deferred, if it's tax free, tax after tax dollars that are in a 401k that are growing tax deferred, the gain would then be ordinary income as well. That's why we typically talk about doing something like a tax paid distribution and get it out to go to a Roth. So then it's growing completely tax free.
Got it. So you bring a lot of nuance and complexity in here, and I would assume now, after hearing all of this, there could be a lot of benefits for you talking to R360 members who have operating businesses to ensure that what they've set up for their employees maximizes benefits for their employees, because this is something they usually outsource to HR or somebody that really
Well,
probably
and
doesn't.
even more so, like this is a great example though why you don't necessarily want to wait to engage with a financial advisor. I'm not saying that they need to manage your money, but like getting some of these comments around setting everything up correctly, it's not always just accumulating wealth, it's how you accumulate wealth. That you want to make sure that you have someone who's giving you the guidance to get the money placed in the right type of account so it's growing in the right manner, in a tax efficient, compounded manner.
Most people think, oh, I'm going to go get a broker at Merrill Lynch or Goldman or whatever. But most of those, they don't have a CFP. But
Correct.
if somebody did have a CFP designation and maybe a couple others, they would all be able to do these
Yes.
these these things
So
clearly.
you did ask that question. We haven't answered it yet, but with regards to what I would look for if you're hiring an advisor,
Yeah.
first and foremost, I think they have to be a CFP. That is just the gold standard. I think that they need to be a fiduciary, typically an independent firm, legally obligated to put your interest above their own. Legally, right? It's there is no conflict of interest, there's no hidden agenda. And so it allows them to sit on the same side of the table as you. Go back to my brokerage days where when someone might be able to act in a fiduciary capacity, but they still have the ability to get paid a commission, they have a conflict. That is
Right.
by definition a conflict. If
Right.
I'm going
And
to recommend, for example, an insurance policy, I might have done all of the work and demonstrated the value and why someone would need to buy this life insurance policy. It's integrated with their financial plan. But the fact that I'm getting paid for it, I still fundamentally ask the question of, is that in my best interest? Like, and the amount of time, and by the way, that applies to anywhere that there's a commission, right? Like it's,
when I was in the business,
you were
you were getting a percentage of assets. I know that there are CFPs that charge a fixed fee. It's like, I'm a CFP, I'm going to do a plan and it's going to cost you, I don't care if you have 10 million or you have 100,000, it's going to cost you the same thing, or depending on complexity. But what's the difference between a flat fee and paying like a percentage of the
So
assets?
typically when someone's paying an asset under management fee, they're paying that fee to have the alignment. And I would say also accountability. The advisor is financially incentivized to have the portfolio grow in alignment with your goals of having it grow as well.
And what's the average range of fees? Obviously, more money, you're paying less,
Yeah,
but
so it's a declining fee rate usually. I think industry average at $1 million is roughly 130 basis points. 5 million is roughly 90 basis points. 10 million is roughly 50 basis points, give or take. And I think it really is important to denote what other services are being provided, or if it's strictly money management, then you're way overpaying.
right, because we've already established that if you could get 8% on your very own, they have to, you're paying for a delta over what you're able to do. And they got to bring more than just money management. They got to bring in the tax strategies, these
Well,
other
and
things.
you know, one thing that I will place emphasis on though is there is still value in the accountability on the money management side. Like if that is the only reason, so many times our clients they get emotional, and an emotion does not sit in the same room as investments. So if you're the type of person that cannot handle market volatility, but yet you've put your entire portfolio in the S&P and small caps, mid caps, and Bitcoin, for example, well, that's by definition a risky portfolio, and that's going to be volatile. If you can't handle that, and what happens is let's say, for example, what happened in April where the market corrected very quickly, and that leads you to selling and getting out, not only does that potentially have catastrophic tax consequences, but it's also de-risking the portfolio in an emotional period of time that if the advisor can keep you invested, that in itself is going to pay their cost.
Volatility in Bitcoin is a feature, it's not a bug. And the way that I think about it, when I first got in, it was actually one of my buddies in YPO who at the time had the highest use of Bitcoin because of the crazy inflation there. He said, look, do me a favor, put 1 to 2% of your net worth in Bitcoin 2014 and forget about it for 10 years. 10 years. Don't even think about it, and you're going to be happy. What I tell people is not 10, 20. Buy what you can today, put it away, and in 20 years, you're going to be really happy. But it's not an asset that you're going to live on. You're going to pull stuff out. You can't think of it that way. If you can't think long term, then it's probably not for you. You can buy $20 of Bitcoin right now. It's divisible a million. Now that $20 isn't going to become 10 million, but if Bitcoin does, again, what we did with the pennies, the
Balance.
compounding, if it's compounding at 60% a year, it's doubling in like a year plus. If it's 30%, now it's like 2 point something, it's doubling. And if you're young, if you're 20, that means by the time you're 50, there's going to be enough doubling in there. In our company, employees can buy as much like, hey, I want 5% of my salary going into Bitcoin. It automatically within 48 hours is in their cold wallet.
Yeah.
And if they want to stop it at any time, they just every 2 weeks they can change it to 0 or 20% or, but anyway.
It's a nice benefit. I'll admit I'm not doing that for my employees right now. It's a forced savings conduit, right? Like, and of course
Yeah.
it's still available to them if they need it.
And now even better because in less than a year, you're going to be able to go to JP Morgan Chase, put your Bitcoin there, and they'll lend you against it to buy a house. That executive order was signed, I don't know, a couple of months ago by the president. I mean, we could go on
I know
for
we could. We've covered a
a
lot.
very long time, but, and there's 100 other questions I didn't ask you, which we'll have to save for another time. Last kind of thing. Any books that you would recommend to listeners that have really been a big impact? Maybe there's some financial books that they can read also to get smarter on this stuff.
Yeah, so I would say Rick Edelman is one of the best educators I've ever met in my career. Early on, he had a profound impact on me with his books. For somebody who's in high school or college that's trying to get financial literacy. His are great in terms of like these concepts that we talked about today of time value of money and savings, et cetera. I'm a big business development slash self-help slash improvement guy. Jim Collins, Good to Great's one of my religions. I read that every single year. Malcolm Gladwell.
Just read his new book on the airplane.
I haven't read it yet. It's in my bank.
Wow, it explains like the whole OxyContin scandal and why it happened, and I learned a ton. You always learn when you read his books. Any other books that you would recommend?
Those are the ones on the top of my head right now. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I read probably 3 to 4 books every month. Read or listen 3 to 4 books every month. So I'm a big believer in constantly staying educated. And normally when I read a book, I'm looking for like the one nugget. Like, what is the one little thing that I can take and implement and have an impact on my life or other people's lives? And that's the mindset I have usually when I go into those.
I learned early on if you take any book that I've read and you go to the last couple of pages, it'll say page 28, star, what I learned on that page. I always read with a pen, so I'm taking notes.
It's funny. So if I'm reading, I do that. If I'm listening, I keep open Google Keep Notes and I write down the page and I write down the line.
I took with me on a trip a book I hadn't read for a long time. I'm sure you've probably read it. The Little Book of Sales by Jeff Gitomer. Now, we talked about manifesting.
Yep.
I was like, God, it'd be so cool to meet him. I'm on a one-on-one call with them every week for an hour. I'm going to have him on the podcast too. He's such a smart guy. But anyway, I'll let you go. I could talk to you for another hour, but thank you
absolutely
so much, James. Really, really appreciate you coming on to Fortune Fishes, and I hope to see you again.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Charlie.